All right, listen up. Listen. All right, we'll get started today. Again, yesterday, we got all the way to the point where they had stormed the Bastille. So if you were not here yesterday, then you need to get your notes. If you were here yesterday, you should have your notes out. Again, I did most of the work for you. So very easy. All you got to do is have your notes out, follow along, fill in the blanks. If you're not doing that, then I don't really understand what you're doing. But that makes sense in this class because we don't really do what we're supposed to do. So they stormed the Bastille. They did this because why? What was the fear? What was the king going to do to them? He's going to kill them. That was the fear, right? That all started from what? Rumors. Rumors start flying, okay? But after this takes place, the National Assembly creates something called the Declaration of Rights of Man. What do you think it's going to be about? What kind of rights? Yes, freedoms, rights, the things that man can do in this country and in France. Okay, so the Declaration of Rights of Man was adopted by the French Assembly, the National Assembly, in 1789. It was a document that basically detailed the ideas of what people could do in France. In looking at the American Declaration of Independence, the document stated that men are born free and remain equal. This guaranteed the basic rights spoke about by Locke, Rousseau, and Voltaire. All men are born free and equal in rights. These rights included things like liberty, property, and security. It also guaranteed citizens equal justice, freedom of speech, and freedom of religion. To show equality, and this is, again, what we're talking about more today, is how the French Revolution became more radical. How they started thinking very differently than they had ever thought before. They start to try to disregard all the old ways of the world. And so to show that, they actually abolished titles. You couldn't call people by the customary madam or monsieur of French dialect. You could only call people by citizen. It'd be Citizen Isaac or Citizen Taylor. That was just the way that they did those things. So they were all about equality. That was, the ideas of the Enlightenment really influencing this movement and changing things. But the rumors had not gone away, and it creates something called the Great Fear. You can imagine what this is. What do you think is going to go on? They're getting pretty scared. Yeah. And they're scared because they're doing something against the king, who is all-powerful. Okay? So a general panic sweeps through France from July of 1789 to August. During this time, the people basically start throwing out all these crazy ideas. Where was it? Where is my... I know where it is. Rebellion spreads from Paris into the countryside, and from one village to the next, wild rumors circulate that the nobles were hiring outlaws to terrorize the peasants. A wave of senseless panic called the Great Fear rolls through France. So nervous and afraid, they armed themselves for fear of food shortages. Armed with pitchforks and other farm tools, they broke into nobles' manor houses and destroyed all the legal documents that bound them to pay feudal dues. In some cases, the peasants simply burned down the manor houses. So basically, the documents that made them peasants, the documents that tied them to the nobles' land, are thrown out. They're burned and they're gone. And so this breaks up the inequalities of the peasants and the nobles. Basically, everyone's equal at this point, other than the fact that the nobles still think they're better. Rumors circulate that the king's men are burning crops in the field. So again, their fear is rationalized even further. And in October of 1789, thousands of Parisian women riot over the rising price of bread. Brandishing knives, axes, and other weapons, the women marched on the palace of Versailles. They stormed the palace. They killed some guards. These are women taking charge of their revolution. And eventually take the king and queen. They asked at first for the National Assembly to take action and lower the price of bread, which was the main staple of their diet. And the old quote is that Marie Antoinette said, "Let them eat cake." She didn't actually say it. But, again, cake and bread, not very different, right? Well, she didn't actually say that. Someone else did, but they didn't really like her, and that's where rumors can destroy a reputation pretty quickly and easily. They wanted to make Marie Antoinette seem very hard-hearted towards the peasants. And so they eventually attacked the palace, killing some of the guards, and they demanded that Louis and Marie Antoinette return to Paris. And after some time, they did, because they didn't want to be stabbed with knives and axes and pitchforks. So, well, they had knives and axes and pitchforks. They didn't have guns. And the peasants killed all the guards, so yeah. I wouldn't want to be stabbed with a pitchfork. I don't think that'd be a good way to go. Doesn't seem like, like if my choice is come with me or get stabbed with a pitchfork, I'm going. Maybe, or I just have like 4 holes in me. Oh, that would look. Along with all these changes, they came up with a new constitution. In 1791, they presented the king with a constitution that would create a constitutional monarchy. If y'all can remember, constitutional monarchy meant what for the king? Yeah, well, not no power, but less power. You remember, they're absolute monarch in France, and constitutional monarchy means limit to his power. So what do you think the king said? No. Yeah, that's basically what he said. He's like, yeah, no, thanks. I'm good. I like having all the power. It's all good. We'll send him down there. Yeah. Good. The Constitution that was created, which was the main task of the National Assembly, set up a limited monarchy that placed rules on the absolute monarch. He created a new legislative assembly, which was basically like a new government, to make laws, collect taxes, decide on issues of war and peace. They supported free trade. They compensated the nobles, abolished guilds, just a whole bunch of stuff. But basically, he said no. And basically, it just really freaks out the king. So he does what every good leader did back then. No, even worse. He abandoned ship. So in the middle of the night, he tries to take his family and flee to Austria. And he's caught on the border country of Varnes. And did they kill him? Not yet. But just like anybody that would be abandoning the ship or abandoning their unit, what is he thought of to be? A traitor. And he's committing treason. And treasonous people have what happened to them? They are killed. Yeah, they're executed during this time frame. It's crazy that he was actually caught. He was in a carriage, and they're disguised, and they're trying to leave, and like one person sees into the carriage and sees him. And they're like, I think that's the king. I think they had like a newspaper or something, and they were like looking at it, and they looked up, and it was like, that's the king. And they stopped the carriage, and they get him out, and they parade him back to Paris, and basically he kind of knew what was coming next. At this point in time, he doesn't have much power. The people have basically overthrown every organization that would help him. But as most things do we agree on everything in this country? No, we show that right now, right? We can't even pick a president. So the National Assembly soon breaks into different factions. What do you think these factions eventually, in terms of how they think, go? When I say factions, I mean groups. When I say factions, I mean parties, like political parties. So how do you think some of these factions thought? Do what? I couldn't hear you. Yeah, they had debates, but like some of them probably were more conservative. You good? Some of them were more conservative. Some of them were more liberal or radical. And the most radical of those groups was called the Jacobins. There were a couple different groups. They dressed differently. They had different ideas. And they had different ideas of what the government should do for them. The Jacobins were the craziest. When I say radical, that's what I mean. Is they were crazy. They were very, very different. Basically, over time, they had one main leader. They had a bunch of different leaders. But the main leader was Maximilien Robespierre. He slowly gained power, and his supporters set out to build a republic of virtue by wiping out every trace of France's past. Does that sound familiar? You got people in this country that want to take away our history, right? Destroy statues, things like that. And I'm not saying they're right or wrong. I'm just saying that they have an idea of a way they want to do things. Same here. They had a more radical version of the way they wanted to change France. They changed the calendar by renaming the months. They had no Sundays. Why? They wanted to get rid of church because the church was old and dangerous. They did. They removed Sundays. So you had no Sundays. So they considered, they just rewrote the calendar. That's it. That's it. That's the way they did things. They even closed the churches in Paris and the surrounding areas of Paris. So by 1793, you have them holding rallies and speeches against the nobility. And eventually he creates something called the Committee of Public Safety. What does that sound like it's going to do? Make things more safe, right? Not so much. It sounds exactly like that, but it means the exact opposite. It was meant to control the people, and they did. The Committee of Public Safety, its main goal was to protect the revolution from its enemies. It's trying to make sure the revolution continues on. Yes, sir. Yes. And they guided the National Assembly to proclaim France as a republic in September of 1789. Under Robespierre, the Committee of Public Safety started a period of time and rule, about a year, where he governs France as a dictator. I'm ahead of myself. And it becomes the Reign of Terror. This group votes to send King Louis to his death via the guillotine in 1793. You can see that here. Very graphic picture. Nobility. Like I said, a pretty graphic picture here of King Louis being killed by the guillotine. Some information about the guillotine. It was last used in 1977. We'll talk about it. Over 40,000 people are killed with. In 1977 is the last time someone was guillotined. That's not the last time somebody did it. As you can see it here, you lay on the bench, you put your head forward, the blade comes down, and you get a clean swap on the back of your neck. The creator was trying to create a more humane way of killing people. It was equal to all. It did not, do differently for anybody. And he called it a cool breath on the back of your neck. It's supposed to be like cool air on the back of your neck. People did apparently say that people talked and opened their eyes, and their eyes moved around after their heads were cut off. If you read that in your article yesterday. Yeah, about 6 seconds, because there was no damage to the brain. There's still blood flow going on up there for at least a few seconds. And so your eyes and your brain function is still going on. I guess they didn't feel like that was a humane way of killing you. People have been shot in the head and not died.
What if that nerve malfunction and it went down so far?
And then you're like half cut off. I guess it probably did at some point in time. But yeah. Well, before this time, they would still do this, but they would use axes. And they said it would take multiple attempts. So it's like, Did you find him? We'll watch this video later. So the Reign of Terror was instigated by the Jacobins and the Committee of Public Safety and Robespierre, and their main goal was to seek out enemies of France. This is where it gets really, really radical. Under this, often enemies were tried in the morning, meaning they had their trial in the morning, and guillotined in the afternoon. That quick. Robespierre justified his use of terror by suggesting it enabled citizens to remain true to the ideals of the revolution. If you were suspected of being against the revolution or were overheard criticizing the revolution, you could be accused and off with your head. If you didn't use the term citizen when addressing people, that you could have your head chopped off. If you were not fervent enough in your appeal to be with the revolution, off with your head. Meaning, basically, if you didn't like go around cheering the revolution on. You good? Okay.
Why you fighting me? I told you not to eat it.
Okay, listen. All right. So, again, if you are not even just active in the revolution, you are considered against it. So it'd be like us not cheering loud enough for Alabama, and then they chop your head off. So that's how it was. Very radical, very different. Okay, and so as much people as 40,000 were put to death. 3,000 people in Paris alone, and in the last month alone, 1,300 people were put to death. An average of 43 people a day had their head chopped off. That's what it seems like, right? Of course, how do you think the people responded to this idea? You good? How do you think the people eventually responded to a lot of people having their heads chopped off? Yeah, eventually it scared them. Not very good. They didn't like it. Okay, so eventually, after a year long of excessive violence, death, and that's what the Reign of Terror is, and revenge, many people start to believe that Robespierre went too far. Yes. Yes.
Like, would they do babies too?
No. No. So many people started to believe he went too far. They eventually captured him, executed him, and the Reign of Terror ends. Do what? He died on the guillotine. Violence. He was not the only high-profile person that was killed on the guillotine. 2 other members were also killed on the guillotine. We'll watch that video later. I thought I already put that up there.
Wait, we can watch that?
Terror.
We're allowed to watch that in school?
No.
It's probably going to be really censored.
Got it. Good, Austin. Do what? So, at the end of the Reign of Terror, there was the need for a new style of government, and they create a republic. where people were chosen by elected officials to represent their interest in government. Sounds familiar, right? Kind of what we do, right? We elect our officials, they represent us in government.
We don't elect them.
Well, some you're right. They immediately allow male suffrage. Y'all know what male suffrage means? Suffrage means the right to vote. So all males were allowed to vote. It was earlier only tax-paying males could vote. That was taken away.
Basically, the peasants here, they all voted.
Yes. And during this time, King Louis is convicted of treason, suffrage, while crowds cheered in celebration. Isn't that crazy? You're watching people get killed and you're cheering them on.
Well, he was already dead.
Yeah, the same picture from earlier.
I thought he was already dead.
Well, I already talked about it, but yes, I mean, it was this is the same time period. Yeah. And Marie Antoinette was also convicted and executed shortly thereafter.
You gotta watch the husband die.
That's correct.
It's horrible.
That's right.
That's rough.
That is rough. It's about like eating the hottest chip in the world.
Hey, I'm telling you, it's right there for about 30. It's still on my list.
So, I don't think so. Not many. Yeah. Again, there's a lot of notes here. Obviously, a lot of things that we are going over pretty quickly. Not tomorrow. We have covered basically what would be considered the French Revolution. It doesn't truly end here because it's going to keep changing, but the radicalness of it is there. Now, next week, we're going to talk about a new part of it when we discuss how Napoleon comes to power and what he does to change France as well, because it's pretty drastic. Okay, so we'll talk about that next week. What I need you to do now is go to your, get on your Chromebook and go to Schoology. Back one. Here in just a minute. Another one. So go to Schoology. You might need your notes. You might not. It's up to you. No. Your assignment is on today's date. November the 6th. And you can see the instructions here. It's a little bit easier to read if you just go ahead and click this document down at the bottom. So go ahead and click this document and you'll see kind of what I'm talking about. Once you click this document, you'll get this one here, and it says, you have just taken notes on the stages and events of the French Revolution. Your job is to create the front page of a newspaper. So you're a newspaper editor and a writer today. Okay? So get into the role. Think about what their goal is. What is the goal of a newspaper editor and writer? To what? To write stuff. That's right. To inform people. And to sell newspapers, right? Okay? So to sell newspapers, you got to be creative. You got to not be boring. And you got to write a good story. Okay? So your job today is you're going to create a title for your newspaper. You're going to create an illustration of your event, which is basically meaning you're just going to find a picture online. And then you're going to write a news story that includes certain terms that are right here. Okay? I'll go over those in just a minute. The template that you need to use is right here. Yes. You have two choices. Okay? But you will write your newspaper title here. It could be the Daily News, the Macy News, the Peters Report. I don't care. It could be whatever you want it to be. Then you write your headline. The headline's got to be something catchy. You know, people were just writing the titles down earlier, but like if you're talking about the guillotine, why don't you write something like Heads Will Roll? Oh, yeah. But it's catchy, right? You're going to read that article. Think about the articles that you read online. Yeah. Okay. So you have your template here. This is where your illustration will go. You would need to erase all these lines. Why do I have these lines? To kind of show you what it's going to look like. When you type it out, it's 2 columned. It doesn't have to be this long, obviously. But
You're gonna draw an illustration.
You're gonna take.
If you listen, you say you're gonna get one off the internet. Listen.
My bad.
okay? So you'll write here, and then your illustration fits right in between there. Okay? And you have to include certain terms. So if you write about the revolution beginning, you have to include the States General, the Third Estate, the Great Fear, the Tennis Court Oath, the Declaration of Rights of Man, and the National Assembly. If you write about the Reign of Terror, you must include the flight to Varnes, King Louis XVI, Marie Antoinette, the guillotine, Robespierre, the Jacobins, and the Committee of Public Safety. Okay? I don't care how long it is, as long as it includes complete sentences and all those terms. I want you to be creative. Go back over your notes, think about those things, and get into that role of writing. Again, you're having some freedom, but being a little bit controlled. Okay? Because I'm making you do something with those terms and under a certain form, but I want you to write the way you write. Be creative and think outside the box. Yes, Austin. I would, yeah. Yeah, like if you were a writer back then, yes. That's what I would do. You have to include all those terms in one of those 2 things. Now, but how you go about doing that is up to you. It's 7 and 6 terms, basically. Well, you could talk more about that for sure. Yes. Okay. Are there any questions? If you have any questions at home, again, I'm making a video, so if you have any questions at home, send me an email. This is due Sunday, so you have plenty of time to get this done. And have a great day. Not y'all.